Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. I am, of course, your host, Rogan. We're going to read some Tolkien. It's nice to see you. As always, I have the monetization turned off. If you would like to contribute to the cause, the PayPal link is there for that purpose. Thank you in advance. I'm actually logging into PayPal. I haven't checked it in a couple of days, but I don't think anybody's suddenly paid for me to be rescued from abject poverty and misery. No, of course not. Actually, you guys kind of have. It could be a lot worse. Oh, I've started to tear up the back cover of my copy of Lord of the Rings. I really just can't keep nice things. Hopefully this copy will last long enough to... I don't really have access to a bookstore, so... there's a Barnes & Nobles on the USM campus, but been sort of banned from the USM campus. Hi, Zoe. What's up, Zoe? Are you going to hop up and disrupt the stream? Of course she is. Hopefully not like immediately, but soon. I'm sure she will. Thanks for being here, everybody. I'm in the middle of a chapter called A Journey in the Dark. Which chapter is this? Chapter 4 of Book 2 of The Lord of the Rings by Professor Tolkien. Hey, Gandalf. Yeah, it's a little late. I'm a little late. I'm sorry. I took a shower and shaved. The day was drawing to its end, and cold stars were glinting in the sky high above the sunset when the company, with all the speed they could, climbed up the slopes and reached the side of the lake. In breadth it looked to be no more than 2 or 3 furlongs at the widest point. How far it stretched away southward they could not see in the failing light, but its northern end was no more than half a mile from where they stood, and between the stony ridges that enclosed the valley and the water's edge there was a rim of open ground. They hurried forward, for they had still a mile or 2 to go before they could reach the point on the far shore that Gandalf was making for, and then he had still to find the doors. Fun in those chat streams? I think I don't know how fun that is, Gandalf. It's harder work than it seems like it is. And I didn't seem particularly relaxed tonight either. I'm really not well. This is going to be easier because I don't have to engage as much. Yes, Zoe, are you here to fuck up the stream? Oh my god, I swore already. Oh no. When they came to the northernmost corner of the lake, they found a narrow creek that barred their way. It was green and stagnant, thrust out like a slimy arm towards the enclosing hills. Gimli strode forward undeterred and found that the water was shallow, no more than ankle deep at the edge. Behind him they walked in file, threading their way with care, for under the weedy pools were sliding and greasy stones, and footing was treacherous. Frodo shuddered with disgust at the touch of the dark, unclean water on his feet. So you just walked across. You don't need to walk back across. What are you doing? What is it, Zoe? Must you? You can go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, there you go. There you go. You can't lie down right there. Maybe if I move this and this, you can have that spot. You can have the corner now. Is that better, Zoe? You have all this space. You can't cuddle up against the computer, though. You always slash it with your tail and press keys. I love you, Zoe. You're a good kitty. Love you very much, buddy. Oh, you're getting scabby again. Fleas aren't back already, are they? It's just the heat. Oh, poor kitty. Yeah, hold on. That comb. There we go. There we go. Yeah, is that better? That should feel a little better, huh, buddy? You want me to do the other side? Let me do the other side. Come here, come here. There we go. Is that better? Do one more. Let me do one more. There you go, buddy. How's that, Zoe? You got scabs back here too, huh? Poor kitty. Is that a flea? Yeah, they are back already, huh? How does that flea medicine last, man? What's weird is that the fleas get Zoe, but they don't get Pyewacket. Like, they just don't bother her, but they go after Zoe. I'll give you more flea medicine, buddy. I got more flea medicine for you. Poor kitty. I hate to give her the flea medicine too much. It's creepy. It's poison. You have to give her poison. Stop stepping on the computer, buddy. Love you, Zoe. Pyewacket wants some brushing too. You don't need it. You don't have scabs from the fleas. Yes, yes, Pyewacket. My cats are on either side of me now. I can't really turn the camera so you can see, but they're being very cute. I suppose I can go ahead and smoke since none of the kids are here, at least not out loud. There's two people, and one of them's you, Gandalf. I know they'll be here later. As Sam, the last of the company, led Bill up onto the dry ground on the far side, there came a soft sound. A swish, followed by a plop, as if a fish had disturbed the still surface of the water. Turning quickly, they saw ripples, black-edged with shadow in the waning light. Great rings were widening outwards from a point far out in the lake. There was a bubbling noise, and then silence. The dusk deepened, and the last gleams of the sunset were veiled in cloud. Gandalf now pressed on at a great pace, and the others followed as quickly as they could. They reached the strip of dry land between the lake and the cliffs. It was narrow, often hardly a dozen yards across, and encumbered with fallen rock and stones, but they found a way, hugging the cliff and keeping as far from the dark water as they might. A mile southwards along the shore they came upon holly trees. Stumps and dead boughs were rotting in the shallows, the remains, it seemed, of old thickets, or of a hedge that had once lined the road across the drowned valley. But close under the cliff there stood, still strong and living, two tall trees, larger than any trees of holly that Frodo had ever seen or imagined. Their great roots spread from the wall to the water. Under the looming cliffs they had looked like mere bushes when seen from far off from the top of the stair, but now they towered overhead, stiff, dark, and silent, throwing deep night shadows about their feet, standing like sentinel pillars at the end of the road. "Well, here we are at last," said Gandalf. "Here the elven way from Holland ended. Holly was the token of the people of that land, and they planted it here to mark the end of their domain, for the west door was made chiefly for their use in their traffic with the lords of Moria. Those were happier days, when there was still close friendship at times between folk of different race, even between dwarves and elves." "It was not the fault of the dwarves that the friendship waned," said Gimli. "I have not heard that it was the fault of the elves," said Legolas. "I have heard both," said Gandalf, "and I will not give judgment now, but I beg you two, Legolas and Gimli, at least to be friends and to help me. I need you both. The doors are shut and hidden, and the sooner we find them, the better. Night is at hand." Turning to the others, he said, "While I am searching, will you each make ready to enter the mines? For here I fear we must say farewell to our good beast of burden. You must lay aside much of the stuff that we brought against bitter weather. You will not need it inside, nor, I hope, when we come through and journey on down into the south. Instead, each of us must take a share of what the pony carried, especially the food and the water skins." "But you can't leave poor old Bill behind in this forsaken place, Mr. Gandalf," cried Sam, angry and distressed. "I won't have it, and that's flat, after he has come so far and all." "I'm sorry, Sam," said the wizard, "but when the door opens I do not think you will be able to drag your Bill inside into the long dark of Moria. You will have to choose between Bill and your master." He'd follow Mr. Frodo into a dragon's den if I led him, protested Sam. It'd be nothing short of murder to turn him loose with all these wolves about. It will be short of murder, I hope, said Gandalf. He laid his hand on the pony's head and spoke in a low voice. Go with words of guard and guiding on you, he said. You are a wise beast and have learned much in Rivendell. Make your ways to places where you can find grass, and so come in time to Elrond's house, or wherever you wish to go. Oh, I've always liked this art for the gate. It looks very like W.W. Denslow, Aleister Crowley influenced. There, Sam. He will have quite as much chance of escaping wolves and getting home as we have. Sam stood sullenly by the pony and returned no answer. Bill, seeming to understand well what was going on, nuzzled up to him, putting his nose to Sam's ear. Sam burst into tears and fumbled with the straps, unlading all the pony's packs and throwing them on the ground. The others sorted out the goods, making a pile of all that could be left behind and dividing up the rest. When this was done, they turned to watch Gandalf. He appeared to have done nothing. He was standing between the two trees, gazing at the blank wall of the cliff, as if he would bore a hole into it with his eyes. Gimli was wandering about, tapping the stone here and there with his axe. Legolas was pressed against the rock, as if listening. Well, here we are and all ready, said Merry. But where are the doors? I can't see any sign of them. Dwarf doors are not made to be seen when shut, said Gimli. They are invisible, and their own makers cannot find them or open them if their secret is forgotten. But this door was not made to be a secret known only to dwarves, said Gandalf, coming suddenly to life and turning round. Unless things are altogether changed, eyes that know what to look for may discover the signs. He walked forward to the wall. Right between the shadow of the trees there was a smooth space, and over this he passed his hands to and fro, muttering words under his breath. Then he stepped back. Look, he said, can you see anything now? The moon now shone upon the gray face of the rock, but they could see nothing else for a while. Then slowly, on the surface, where the wizard's hands had passed, faint lines appeared, like slender veins of silver running in the stone. At first they were no more than pale gossamer threads, so fine that they only twinkled fitfully where the moon caught them. But steadily they grew broader and clearer, until their design could be guessed. At the top, as high as Gandalf could reach, was an arch of interlacing letters in an elvish character. Below, though the threads were in places blurred or broken, the outline could be seen of an anvil and a hammer surmounted by a crown with 7 stars. Beneath these again were 2 trees, each bearing crescent moons. More clearly than all else there shone forth in the middle of the door a single star with many rays. I'll show it again. It's the illustration for that. It's cool. I think that's one of Tolkien's own. He did do some drawings of his own for this. There are the emblems of Durin, cried Gimli. And there is the tree of the High Elves, said Legolas. And the star of the House of Feanor, said Gandalf. They are wrought of Ithildin, that mirrors only starlight and moonlight, and sleeps until it is touched by one who speaks words now long forgotten in Middle-earth. It is long since I heard them, and I thought deeply before I could recall them to my mind. What does the writing say? Asked Frodo, who was trying to decipher the inscription on the arch. I thought I knew the elf letters, but I cannot read these. The words are in the elven tongue of the west of Middle-earth in the elder days, answered Gandalf, but they do not say anything of importance to us. They say only, the doors of Durin, Lord of Moria, speak friend and enter. And underneath, small and faint, is written, I, Narvi, made them. Celebrimbor of Holland drew these signs. What does it mean by speak friend and enter? Asked Merry. That is plain enough, said Gimli. If you are a friend, speak the password, and the doors will open, and you can enter. Yes, said Gandalf, these doors are probably governed by words. Some dwarf gates will open only at special times or for particular persons, and some have locks and keys that are still needed when all necessary times and words are known. These doors have no key. In the days of Durin they were not secret. They usually stood open, and doorwards sat here. But if they were shut, any who knew the opening word could speak it and pass in. At least so it is recorded, is it not, Gimli? It is, said the dwarf, but what the word was is not remembered. Narvi and his craft and all his kindred have vanished from the earth. But do not you know the word, Gandalf? Asked Boromir in surprise. No, said the wizard. The others looked dismayed. Only Aragorn, who knew Gandalf well, remained silent and unmoved. "Then what was the use of bringing us to this accursed spot?" cried Boromir, glancing back with a shudder at the dark water. "You told us that you had once passed through the mines. How could that be if you did not know how to enter?" "The answer to your first question, Boromir," said the wizard, "is that I do not know the word yet, but we shall soon see. And," he added, with a glint in his eyes under their bristling brows, "you may ask what is the use of my deeds when they are proved useless. As for your other question, do you doubt my tale, or have you no wits left? I did not enter this way. I came from the east. If you wish to know, I will tell you that these doors open outwards from the inside. From the inside, you may thrust them open with your hands. From the outside, nothing will move them save the spell of command. They cannot be forced inwards." "What are you going to do then?" asked Pippin, undaunted by the wizard's bristling brows. "Knock on the doors with your head, Peregrine Took," said Gandalf. "But if that does not shatter them, and I am allowed a little peace from foolish questions, I will seek for the opening words. I once knew every spell in all the tongues of elves or men or orcs that was ever used for such a purpose. I can still remember 10 score of them without searching in my mind. But only a few trials, I think, will be needed, and I shall not have to call on Gimli for words of the secret dwarf tongue that they teach to none. The opening words were elvish, like the writing on the arch. That seems certain." He stepped up to the rock again and lightly touched with his staff the silver star in the middle beneath the sign of the anvil. "Anon ed Helen, edrohi Anman, fenas na Gothram, lasto Bethlaman," he said in a commanding voice. The silver lines faded, but the blank gray stone did not stir. Many times he repeated these words in different order or varied them. Then he tried other spells, one after another, speaking now faster and louder, now soft and slow. Then he spoke many single words of elvish speech. Nothing happened. The cliff towered into the night, the countless stars were kindled, the wind blew cold, and the doors stood fast. Again Gandalf approached the wall, and lifting up his arms he spoke in tones of command and rising wrath. "Adro, Adro," he cried, and struck the rock with his staff. "Open, open," he shouted, and followed it with the same command in every language that had ever been spoken in the west of Middle-earth. Then he threw his staff on the ground and sat down in silence. At that moment, from far off, the wind bore to their listening ears the howling of wolves. Bill the pony started in fear, and Sam sprang to his side and whispered softly to him. "Do not let him run away," said Boromir. "It seems that we shall need him still if the wolves do not find us. How I hate this foul pool." He stooped, and picking up a large stone, he cast it far into the dark water. Hold on. He stooped, and picking up a large stone, he cast it far into the dark water. The stone vanished with a soft slap, but at the same instant there was a swish and a bubble. Great rippling rings formed on the surface out beyond where the stone had fallen, and they moved slowly towards the foot of the cliff. "Why did you do that, Boromir?" said Frodo. "I hate this place too, and I am afraid. I don't know of what. Not of wolves, or the dark behind the doors, but of something else. I am afraid of the pool. Don't disturb it." "I wish we could get away," said Merry. "Why doesn't Gandalf do something quick?" said Pippin. Gandalf took no notice of them. He sat with his head bowed, either in despair or in anxious thought. The mournful howling of the wolves was heard again. The ripples on the water grew and came closer. Some were already lapping on the shore. With a suddenness that startled them all, the wizard sprang to his feet. He was laughing. "I have it," he cried. Of course, of course. Absurdly simple, like most riddles when you see the answer." Picking up his staff, he stood before the rock and said in a clear voice, "Melon." The star shone out briefly and faded again. Then silently a great doorway was outlined, though not a crack or joint had been visible before. Slowly it divided in the middle and swung outwards inch by inch until both doors lay back against the wall. Through the opening a shadowy stair could be seen climbing steeply up, but beyond the lower steps the darkness was deeper than the night. The company stared in wonder. I was wrong after all, said Gandalf, and Gimli too. Merry, of all people, was on the right track. The opening word was inscribed on the archway all the time. The translation should have been, say friend and enter. I had only to speak the Elvish word for friend, and the doors opened. Quite simple. Too simple for a learned lore master in these suspicious days. Those were happier times. Now let us go. Yes, Zoe. You gonna cross again? You need me to move that lamp for you? Move that. You gonna walk across? Zoe wants to go sit on that shelf, but Pyewacket's already over that. Zoe Bowie, I love you, buddy. Yeah, you gonna try? Maybe she'll let you snuggle with her. Sometimes she does. Yeah, that's very cute. Pyewacket's grooming Zoe's head. Gandalf strode forward and set his foot on the lowest step. But at that moment, several things happened. Frodo felt something seize him by the ankle, and he fell with a cry. Bill the pony gave a wild neigh of fear and turned tail and dashed away along the lakeside into the darkness. Sam leaped after him, and then hearing Frodo's cry, he ran back again, weeping and cursing. The others swung round and saw the waters of the lake seething, as if a host of snakes were swimming up from the southern end. Out from the water a long sinuous tentacle had crawled. It was pale green and luminous and wet. Listen, you guys. Don't hiss at your sister and swat her while you're grooming her. You have your tongue out. You look retarded. There you go. Be good, you guys. There's room for you both there. You don't have to be obnoxious. Are you guys going to be good? Be good. This is a very dramatic point in the story that I'm reading. Thank you, Pyewacket. Just stand down. There you go. Yeah, just curl up, buddy. There you go, Pyewacket. Now, Zoe, are you going to relax? Come on. There you go. Yeah, there's plenty of room right there. You can lie down right there, buddy. Out from the water a long sinuous tentacle had crawled. It was pale green and luminous and wet. Its fingered end had hold of Frodo's foot and was dragging him into the water. Sam, on his knees, was now slashing at it with a knife. The arm let go of Frodo, and Sam pulled him away, crying out for help. 20 other arms came rippling out. The dark water boiled, and there was a hideous stench. Into the gateway, up the stairs, quick, shouted Gandalf, leaping back. Rousing Zoe, you can't do that. Thank you, Zoe. Rousing them from the horror that seemed to have rooted all but Sam to the ground where they stood, he drove them forward. They were just in time. Sam and Frodo were only a few steps up, and Gandalf had just begun to climb, when the groping tentacles writhed across the narrow shore and fingered the cliff wall and the doors. One came wriggling over the threshold, glistening in the starlight. Gandalf turned and paused. If he was considering what word would close the gate again from within, there was no need. Many coiling arms seized the doors on either side and with horrible strength swung them round. With a shattering echo they slammed, and all light was lost. A noise of rending and crashing came dully through the ponderous stone. Sam, clinging to Frodo's arm, collapsed on a step in the black darkness. Zoe, no. No. There you go. Just relax. Sam, clinging to Frodo's arm, collapsed on a step in the black darkness. Poor old Bill, he said in a choking voice. Poor old Bill. Wolves and snakes, but the snakes were too much for him. I had to choose, Mr. Frodo. I had to come with you. They heard Gandalf go back down the steps and thrust his staff against the doors. There was a quiver in the stone, and the stairs trembled, but the doors did not open. Well, well, said the wizard, the passage is blocked behind us now, and there is only one way out, on the other side of the mountains. I fear from the sounds that boulders have been piled up, and the trees uprooted and thrown across the gate. I am sorry, for the trees were beautiful, and had stood so long. I felt that something horrible was near from the moment that my foot first touched the water, said Frodo. What was the thing, or were there many of them? "I do not know," answered Gandalf, "but the arms were all guided by one purpose. Something has crept or has been driven out of dark waters under the mountains. There are older and fouler things than orcs in the deep places of the world." He did not speak aloud his thought that whatever it was that dwelt in the lake, it had seized on Frodo first among all the company. Boromir muttered under his breath, but the echoing stone magnified the sound to a hoarse whisper that all could hear. "In the deep places of the world, and thither we are going against my wish. Who will lead us now in this deadly dark?" "I will," said Gandalf, "and Gimli shall walk with me. Follow my staff." "Okay, Zoe, now you can come darting across the keyboard. Do you want treats?" Gandalf, I read the origin of Pyewacket's name on stream. I don't know, a night or two ago, in one of the chat streams. Go ahead, hop down. It's from a 17th century witch trial. I think it's from the Witch Hammer. It's Matthew Hopkins, the Witchfinder General, testified, or wrote about it. Wrote about the testimony, I guess is the way to put it. A witch was tortured for 4 days, and finally gave up the names of her familiar spirits. And the list of her names of familiars included Pyewacket. Pyewacket, the original invented familiar spirit, was not actually a cat. Pyewacket was an imp. But then it turns up again as a reference in Bell Book and Candle with Kim Novak. Kim Novak plays a witch who magics a guy into falling in love with her, and her familiar is a cat named Pyewacket. Yeah, that's where her name comes from. As the wizard passed on ahead up the great steps, he held his staff aloft, and from its tip there came a faint radiance. The wide stairway was sound and undamaged. 200 steps they counted, broad and shallow, and at the top they found an arched passage with a level floor leading on into the dark. "Let us sit and rest and have something to..." Oh, it's Frodo. "Let us sit and rest and have something to eat here on the landing, since we can't find a dining room," said Frodo. He had begun to shake off the terror of the clutching arm, and suddenly he felt extremely hungry. The proposal was welcomed by all, and they sat down on the upper steps, dim figures in the gloom. After they had eaten, Gandalf gave them each a third sip of the Miruvor of Rivendell. "It will not last much longer, I am afraid," he said, "but I think we need it after that horror at the gate. And unless we have great luck, we shall need all that is left before we see the other side. Go carefully with the water, too. There are many streams and wells in the mines, but they should not be touched. We may not have a chance of filling our skins in bottles till we come down into Dimrill Vale." "But how long is that going to take us?" asked Frodo. "I cannot say," answered Gandalf. "It depends on many chances. But going straight, without mishap or losing our way, we shall take 3 or 4 marches, I expect. It cannot be less than 40 miles from West Door to East Gate in a direct line, and the road may wind much." After only a brief rest, they started on their way again. All were eager to get the journey over as quickly as possible, and were willing, tired as they were, to go on marching still for several hours. Gandalf walked in front, as before. In his left hand he held up his glimmering staff, the light of which just showed the ground before his feet. In his right he held his sword Glamdring. Behind him came Gimli, his eyes glinting in the dim light as he turned his head from side to side. Behind the dwarf walked Frodo, and he had drawn the short sword, Sting. No gleam came from the blades of Sting or of Glamdring, and that was some comfort, for being the work of elvish smiths in the elder days, these swords shone with a cold light if any orcs were near at hand. Behind Frodo went Sam, and after him Legolas, and the young hobbits, and Boromir. In the dark at the rear, grim and silent, walked Aragorn. The passage twisted round a few turns, and then began to descend. It went steadily down for a long while before it became level once again. The air grew hot and stifling, but it was not foul, and at times they felt currents of cooler air upon their faces, issuing from half-guessed openings in the walls. There were many of these. In the pale ray of the wizard's staff, Frodo caught glimpses of stairs and arches, and of other passages and tunnels, sloping up, or running steeply down, or opening blankly dark on either side. It was bewildering beyond hope of remembering. Gimli aided Gandalf very little except by his stout courage. At least he was not, as were most of the others, troubled by the mere darkness in itself. Often the wizard consulted him at points where the choice of way was doubtful, but it was always Gandalf who had the final word. The mines of Moria were vast and intricate beyond the imagination of Gimli, Glóin's son, dwarf of the mountain race though he was. To Gandalf, the far-off memories of a journey long before were now of little help. But even in the gloom, and despite all windings of the road, he knew whither he wished to go, and he did not falter as long as there was a path that led towards his goal. Hold on a second. I'm going to take another part of a gummy. Just a little one. There is actually a little one. Have a little bit more kratom. I was thinking about the mushroom gummies. Thinking about it. I guess not. I guess I've had enough of that stuff for the night. Really need to eat. Thanks for being here, guys. I try not to get distracted by personal ephemera and effluvia while I do these Tolkien streams. Well, the reading streams generally. Thanks for being here. I really have not been in a great mood today. It's really nice to be in here reading Tolkien, and one of my favorite parts of the book. Thanks again for being here. Going to Moria. Do not be afraid, said Aragorn. There was a pause longer than usual, and Gandalf and Gimli were whispering together. The others were crowded behind, waiting anxiously. Do not be afraid. I have been with him on many a journey, if never on one so dark, and there are tales in Rivendell of greater deeds of his than any I have seen. He will not go astray, if there is any path to find. He has led us in here against our fears, but he will lead us out again, at whatever cost to himself. He is surer of finding the way home in a blind night than the cats of Queen Baruthiel. Yeah, thanks for the hearts. I'm shutting the door because it's a little chilly. I guess it's getting chilly again, which is good since I don't have air conditioning back here when the door is shut. It was well for the company that they had such a guide. They had no fuel nor any means of making torches. In the desperate scramble at the doors, many things had been left behind. But without any light, they would soon have come to grief. There were not only many roads to choose from, there were also in many places holes and pitfalls and dark wells beside the path in which their passing feet echoed. There were fissures and chasms in the walls and floor, and every now and then a crack would open right before their feet. The widest was more than 7 feet across, and it was long before Pippin could summon enough courage to leap over the dreadful gap. The noise of churning water came up from far below, as if some great mill wheel was turning in the depths. Rope, muttered Sam. I knew I'd want it if I hadn't got it. As these dangers became more frequent, their march became slower. Already they seemed to have been tramping on, endlessly to the mountain's roots. They were more than weary, and yet there seemed no comfort in the thought of halting anywhere. Frodo's spirits had risen for a while after his escape, and after food and a draught of the cordial, but now a deep uneasiness, growing to dread, crept over him again. Though he had been healed in Rivendell of the knife stroke, that grim wound had not been without effect. His senses were sharper and more aware of things that could not be seen. One sign of change that he soon had noticed was that he could see more in the dark than any of his companions, save perhaps Gandalf, and he was in any case the bearer of the ring. It hung upon its chain against his breast, and at whiles it seemed a heavy weight. He felt the certainty of evil ahead and of evil following, but he said nothing. He gripped tighter on the hilt of his sword and went on doggedly. The company behind him spoke seldom, and then only in hurried whispers. There was no sound but the sound of their own feet, the dull stump of Gimli's dwarf boots, the heavy tread of Boromir, the light step of Legolas, the soft, scarce-heard patter of hobbit feet, and in the rear the slow, firm footfalls of Aragorn with his long stride. When they halted for a moment, they heard nothing at all, unless it were occasionally a faint trickle and drip of unseen water. Yet Frodo began to hear, or to imagine that he heard, something else, like the faint fall of soft bare feet. It was never loud enough or near enough for him to feel certain that he heard it, but once it had started, it never stopped while the company was moving. But it was not an echo, for when they halted, it pattered on for a little all by itself, and then grew still. Hey, oh, so very ordinary. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming back. Thank you. It was after nightfall when they had entered the mines. They had been going for several hours with only brief halts when Gandalf came to his first serious check. Before him stood a wide, dark arch opening into 3 passages, all led in the same general direction, eastwards, but the left-hand passage plunged down, while the right-hand climbed up, and the middle way seemed to run on, smooth and level, but very narrow. "I have no memory of this place at all," said Gandalf, standing uncertainly under the arch. He held up his staff in the hope of finding some marks or inscription that might help his choice, but nothing of the kind was to be seen. "I'm too weary to decide," he said, shaking his head, "and I expect that you are all as weary as I am, or wearier. We had better halt here for what is left of the night. You know what I mean. In here it is ever dark, but outside the late moon is riding westward and the middle night has passed." "Poor old Bill," said Sam. "I wonder where he is. I hope those wolves haven't got him yet." "Hey, Christina." To the left of the great arch they found a stone door. It was half closed, but swung back easily to a gentle thrust. Beyond there seemed to lie a wide chamber cut in the rock. "Steady, steady," cried Gandalf as Merry and Pippin pushed forward, glad to find a place where they could rest with at least more feeling of shelter than in the open passage. "Steady! You do not know what is inside yet. I will go first." He went in cautiously, and the others filed behind. "There," he said, pointing with his staff to the middle of the floor. Before his feet they saw a large round hole like the mouth of a well. Broken and rusty chains lay at the edge and trailed down into the black pit. Fragments of stone lay near. "One of you might have fallen in and still be wondering when you were going to strike the bottom," said Aragorn to Merry. "Let the guide go first while you have one." "This seems to have been a guard room, made for the watching of the 3 passages," said Gimli. "That hole was plainly a well for the guard's use, covered with a stone lid, but the lid is broken, and we must all take care in the dark." Pippin, I did the elf voice for Gimli. I don't know why I'm doing an effeminate voice for the elf and the masculine voice for the dwarf, but it seems to be, it's kind of instinctive. I'm not sure how else I should be trying to do that. I'm going for a little bit more mushroom gummy. I can't help it. I love the Mines of Moria. This is my favorite part of the book. I know I've been streaming all day. My voice is all roughened. It's just a little one. Like a little part of a gummy. I'm gonna take some Tylenol. And I will eat after I'm done. I'm gonna have to stop and get water at some point. You know what? Maybe I should do that now. Hold on, guys. I am gonna do that. I'm filling 2 water bottles. I will be right back. Because I feel like it might be a long haul for reading the whole Mines of Moria sequence, but like, I don't feel like stopping. Like, I already know I want to read this whole part straight through. I don't know if it's going to take more than I probably have an hour before my voice and my like affect give out. Like my actor affect gives out like a muscle that's been overtaxed at some point, and I can't really do it right anymore. The like actor voice, the performer voice. Pippin felt curiously attracted by the well. While the others were unrolling blankets and making beds against the walls of the chamber, as far as possible from the hole in the floor, he crept to the edge and peered over. A chill air seemed to strike his face, rising from invisible depths. Moved by a sudden impulse, he groped for a loose stone and let it drop. He felt his heart beat many times before there was any sound. Then, far below, as if the stone had fallen into deep water in some cavernous place, there came a plunk, very distant, but magnified and repeated in the hollow shaft. "What's that?" cried Gandalf. He was relieved when Pippin confessed what he had done, but he was angry, and Pippin could see his eye glinting. "Fool of a took," he growled. "This is a serious journey, not a hobbit walking party. Throw yourself in next time, and then you will be no further nuisance. Now be quiet." Nothing more was heard for several minutes, but then there came out of the depths faint knocks. Tom tap, tap, tom. They stopped, and when the echoes had died away, they were repeated. Tap, tom, tom, tap, 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 tom. They sounded disquietingly like signals of some sort, but after a while the knocking died away and was not heard again. "That was the sound of a hammer, or I have never heard one," said Gimli. "Yes," said Gandalf, "and I do not like it. It may have nothing to do with Peregrine's foolish stone, but probably something has been disturbed that would have been better left quiet. Pray do nothing of the kind again. Let us hope we shall get some rest without further trouble. You, Pippin, can go on the first watch as a reward," he growled, as he rolled himself in a blanket. Pippin sat miserably by the door in the pitch dark, but he kept on turning round, fearing that some unknown thing would crawl up out of the well. He wished he could cover the hole, if only with a blanket, but he dared not move or go near it, even though Gandalf seemed to be asleep. Actually, Gandalf was awake, though lying still and silent. He was deep in thought, trying to recall every memory of his former journey in the mines, and considering anxiously the next course that he should take. A false turn now might be disastrous. After an hour, he rose up and came over to Pippin. "Get into a corner and have a sleep, my lad," he said in a kindly tone. "You want to sleep, I expect. I cannot get a wink, so I may as well do the watching." "I know what is the matter with me," he muttered as he sat down by the door. "I need smoke. I have not tasted it since the morning before the snowstorm." The last thing that Pippin saw as sleep took him was a dark glimpse of the old wizard huddled on the floor, shielding a glowing chip in his gnarled hands between his knees. The flicker for a moment showed his sharp nose and the puff of smoke. It was Gandalf who roused them all from sleep. He had sat and watched all alone for about 6 hours and had let the others rest. "And in the watches I have made up my mind," he said. "I do not like the feel of the middle way, and I do not like the smell of the left-hand way. There is foul air down there, or I am no guide. I shall take the right-hand passage. It is time we began to climb up again." For 8 dark hours, not counting 2 brief halts, they marched on, and they met no danger, and heard nothing, and saw nothing but the faint gleam of the wizard's light bobbing like a will-o'-the-wisp in front of them. The passage they had chosen wound steadily upwards. As far as they could judge, it went in great mounting curves, and as it rose, it grew loftier and wider. There were now no openings to other galleries or tunnels on either side, and the floor was level and sound, without pits or cracks. Evidently they had struck what once had been an important road, and they went forward quicker than they had done on their first march. In this way they advanced some 15 miles, measured in a direct line east, though they must have actually walked 20 miles or more. As the road climbed upwards, Frodo's spirits rose a little, but he still felt depressed, and still at times he heard, or thought he heard, away behind the company and beyond the fall and patter of their feet, a following footstep that was not an echo. They had marched as far as the hobbits could endure without a rest, and all were thinking of a place where they could sleep, when suddenly the walls to right and left vanished. They seemed to have passed through some arched doorway into a black and empty space. There was a great draught of warmer air behind them, and before them the darkness was cold on their faces. They halted and crowded anxiously together. Gandalf seemed pleased. "I chose the right way," he said. "At last we are coming to the habitable parts, and I guess that we are not far now from the eastern side. But we are high up, a good deal higher than the dim rail gate, unless I am mistaken. From the feeling of the air, we must be in a wide hall. I will now risk a little real light." He raised his staff, and for a brief instant there was a blaze like a flash of lightning. Great shadows sprang up and fled, and for a second they saw a vast roof far above their heads, upheld by many mighty pillars hewn of stone. Before them and on either side stretched a huge empty hall. Its black walls, polished and smooth as glass, flashed and glittered. Three other entrances they saw, dark black arches, one straight before them eastwards, and one on either side. Then the light went out. "That is all that I shall venture on for the present," said Gandalf. "There used to be great windows on the mountainside, and shafts leading out to the light in the upper reaches of the mines. I think we have reached them now, but it is night outside again, and we cannot tell until morning. If I am right, tomorrow we may actually see the morning peeping in. But in the meanwhile, we had better go no further. Let us rest, if we can. Things have gone well so far, and the greater part of the dark road is over. But we are not through yet, and it is a long way down to the gates that open on the world." The company spent that night in the great cavernous hall, huddled close together in a corner to escape the draught. There seemed to be a steady inflow of chill air through the eastern archway. All about them as they lay hung the darkness, hollow and immense, and they were oppressed by the loneliness and vastness of the Dalvin halls and endlessly branching stairs and passages. The wildest imaginings that dark rumor had ever suggested to the hobbits fell altogether short of the actual dread and wonder of Moria. "There must have been a mighty crowd of dwarves here at one time," said Sam, "and every one of them busier than badgers for 500 years to make all this, and most in hard rock, too. What did they do it all for? They didn't live in these darksome holes, surely." "These are not holes," said Gimli. "This is the great realm and city of the Dwarrodelf, and of old it was not darksome, but full of light and splendor, as is still remembered in our songs." Oh no, a song. He rose, and standing in the dark, he began to chant in a deep voice while the echoes ran away into the roof. "The world was young, the mountains green, no stain yet on the moon was seen. No words were laid on stream or stone when Durin woke and walked alone. He named the nameless hills and dells. He drank from yet untasted wells. He stooped and looked in mirror, and saw a crown of stars appear as gems upon a silver thread above the shadow of his head. The world was fair, the mountains tall, in elder days before the fall of mighty kings in Nargothrond and Gondolin, who now beyond the western seas have passed away. The world was fair in Durin's day. A king he was on carven throne, in many pillared halls of stone, with golden roof and silver floor, and runes of power upon the door. The light of sun and star and moon, in shining lamps of crystal hewn, undimmed by cloud or shade of night, there shone forever fair and bright. There hammer on the anvil smote, there chisel clove, and graver wrote. There forged was blade, and bound was hilt, the delver mined, the mason built. Their beryl, pearl, and opal pale, and metal wrought like fish's mail, buckler and corselet, axe and sword, and shining spears were laid in hoard. Unwearied then were Durin's folk. Beneath the mountains music woke, the harpers harped, the minstrels sang, and at the gates the trumpets rang. The world is gray, the mountains old, the forge's fire is ashen cold. No harp is rung, no hammer falls. The darkness dwells in Durin's halls. The shadow lies upon his tomb, in Moria, in Khazad Dûm. But still the sunken stars appear in dark and windless mirror. There lies his crown in water deep, till Durin wakes again from sleep. Hello, Oscar Bokoblin. Uh, I like that, said Sam. I should like to learn it. In Moria, in Khazad-dûm, but it makes the darkness seem heavier thinking of all those lamps. Are there piles of jewels and gold lying about here still? Gimli was silent. Having sung his song, he would say no more. Piles of jewels, said Gandalf. No. The orcs have often plundered Moria. There is nothing left in the upper halls. And since the dwarves fled, no one dares to seek the shafts and treasuries down in the deep places. They are drowned in water or in a shadow of fear. Then what do the dwarves want to come back for? Asked Sam. For Mithril, answered Gandalf. The wealth of Moria was not in gold and jewels, the toys of the dwarves, nor in iron, their servant. Such things they found here, it is true, especially iron, but they did not need to delve for them. All things that they desired they could obtain in traffic. For here alone in the world was found Moria silver, or true silver, as some have called it. Mithril is the elvish name. The dwarves have a name which they do not tell. Its worth was 10 times that of gold, and now it is beyond price, for little is left above ground, and even the orcs dare not delve here for it. The loads lead away north towards Caradras and down to darkness. The dwarves tell no tale, but even as Mithril was the foundation of their wealth, so also it was their destruction. They delved too greedily and too deep, and disturbed that from which they fled, Durin's bane. Of what they brought to light, the orcs have gathered nearly all, and given it in tribute to Sauron, who covets it. Mithril. All folk desired it. It could be beaten like copper and polished like glass, and the dwarves could make of it a metal, light and yet harder than tempered steel. Its beauty was like to that of common silver, but the beauty of Mithril did not tarnish or grow dim. The elves dearly loved it, and among many uses they made of it Ithildin, Star Moon, which you saw upon the doors. Bilbo had a corselet of mithril rings that Thorin gave him. I wonder what has become of it. Gathering dust still in Mishel Delving Matham House, I suppose. What? Cried Gimli, startled out of his silence. A corselet of Moria silver? That was a kingly gift. Yes, said Gandalf. I never told him, but its worth was greater than the value of the whole Shire and everything in it. Frodo said nothing, but he put his hand under his tunic and touched the rings of his mail shirt. He felt staggered to think that he had been walking about with the price of the Shire under his jacket. Had Bilbo known? He felt no doubt that Bilbo knew quite well. It was indeed a kingly gift. But now his thoughts had been carried away from the dark mines to Rivendell, to Bilbo, and to Bag End in the days while Bilbo was still there. He wished with all his heart that he was back there, and in those days, mowing the lawn, or pottering among the flowers, and that he had never heard of Moria, or Mithril, or the ring. Oscar, I would encourage you to come in here and listen to all the books I read. The books I read are a little bit more fun than what they generally teach in school. Lord of the Rings was never, like, maybe they use it in high school now. It really didn't have a literary reputation before the Peter Jackson movies like it should. It had a cult following, like a huge cult following. It had been a bestseller. It was a perennial bestseller. But it was like, I don't know, like the Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, or like L. Ron Hubbard. Like, it had sort of an iffy reputation as literature. Like, a lot of mainstream readers didn't like Lord of the Rings. I mean, they still don't, but it now has a gigantic reputation. It didn't used to. I mean, it always deserved it, of course. It is I think it's probably the best novel of the 20th century. Yeah. I don't know what would, yeah. It's the one I've read the most. A deep silence fell. One by one, the others fell asleep. Frodo was on guard. As if it were a breath that came in through unseen doors out of deep places, dread came over him. His hands were cold and his brow damp. He listened. All his mind was given to listening and nothing else for 2 slow hours, but he heard no sound, not even the imagined echo of a footfall. You need to read O Pioneers by Willa Cather, huh? Willa Cather is kind of tough, but she's a pretty good writer. There's it's easier going than you expect sentence by sentence, but it doesn't add up to much. It's not a terrible book though. You can get through it. If I wasn't already reading this, I could read. Yeah, maybe I should set out to do readings of all the standard high school outside reading books and do like annotation and commentary. Some of them aren't very fun though. Some of those books are a lot more fun to be read out loud than you would think, or like, I mean, the Scarlet Letter would be a fun one to read out loud, actually, for high school stuff. I don't even know half of what they teach in high school now, though. Recent books I have not read. The Scarlet Letter. Yeah, Nathaniel Hawthorne's fun. The Scarlet Letter is maybe his least fun book. Like, he's all about neo-Gothic stylings. The Scarlet Letter being about adultery, and like it's just sort of ponderous. All the stuff about Puritans is sort of ponderous. It made no sense for me. Yeah, I mean, that that's why I immediately thought of it for a book that would be beneficial for like me to interject commentary, and because I know the context really well. I mean, I don't have a degree, but I'm definitely English professor trained by like my reading. Um, I mean, yeah, it's hard when you're in high school to see why they would even bother to teach the Scarlet Letter in high school. It's not it's not very fun. It sure doesn't make you want to read more books. Doesn't even want like you're like mental note, no more Nathaniel Hawthorne, please and thank you. Nathaniel Hawthorne wrote some great horror stories. House of Seven Gables is more fun than Scarlet Letter. Um, yeah, a lot more fun. It's similar, but it doesn't have the Puritans. You had to read Jonathan Livingston Seagull in high school? Yeah, I mean, that's what I said, like, that half of what they teach is books I haven't read, because there's fashions in that stuff. Like, I think you're maybe a little older than me, Gandalf, because Jonathan Livingston Seagull was still kind of famous when I was in high school. They wouldn't have taught it in high school. Um, but we had to read. There's something you reminded me of that we had to read in high school that wasn't a great call, that was kind of just fashionable. Oh, um, Oh, Pride and Prejudice? Pride and Prejudice is fun because now you can watch Pride and Prejudice and Zombies and get all the jokes. Pride and Prejudice and Zombies is super funny. I don't know why people don't know how funny that movie is. Like, it had a rep for being boneheaded stupid when it came out. Red and I fucking loved it. That movie is great. It's super fun and super funny and really clever. It's really smart. Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. Um, That was 74. Yeah, Jonathan Livingston Seagull. There's a movie of it that's interesting too. Um, yeah, Jane Austen's not bad. I like Charles Dickens more. I would have thought that I can't get away with doing British authors as a reader, but I'm getting away with Lord of the Rings. I mean, the rhythm of the like it's weird how I can do British rhythms without doing the British accent. Sometimes I have to lean into the accent a little bit. God, my nose is itching. I'm gonna die. That dog is really, if those people ever have a burglar over there, how would they even know? The dog is on full rove alert at all times. My cat's glowing eyes. Do I have a cat with glowing eyes? Is there a cat back there? There is a cat back there. Frodo's watch was nearly over when, far off where he guessed that the western archway stood, he fancied that he could see two pale points of light, almost like luminous eyes. That's creepy, Oscar. That's really disturbing. Um, and did you know that was coming up? You didn't know that was coming up. That's totally a coincidence. Jane Austen's a good writer sentence by sentence, but her obsessive need to be girly about marriageability and eligible men it gets old. But she's not unfun. I think Charles Dickens is more fun, the socially conscious thing with him. Victor Hugo's more gothic. For girly, I like Elizabeth Gaskell more than Jane Austen. For like girly gothic adjacent, Elizabeth Gaskell is super fun. But yeah, if I read Jane Austen out loud in here, I would certainly get some. It's such a girly voice. I don't know if I could get away with reading Jane Austen. I don't know. Nobody wrote that girly in the 19th century, I guess. I'd rather do Charles Dickens. People read Austen a lot more, though. I could do Northanger Abbey. That might be fun. My nose is going to itch entirely off. I'm just going to set my nose on fire. Oh my God. What is even happening to my face? What is even happening? I'm going to hit the pipe again. Have I read Beloved? No, actually, I have not, but I've heard it's great. I've heard that's great a lot for a long time now. And I only saw about the first half hour of the movie because because I was drunk, actually, and I got distracted. But it was intense. The movie's crazy. All right, I'm going to get back to reading. I'm going to ignore chat now. Thanks for being here, guys. Frodo's watch was nearly over when, far off where he guessed that the western archway stood, he fancied that he could see two pale points of light, almost like luminous eyes. He started. His head had nodded. I must have nearly fallen asleep on guard, he thought. I was on the edge of a dream. He stood up and rubbed his eyes and remained standing, peering into the dark until he was relieved by Legolas. When he lay down, he quickly went to sleep, but it seemed to him that the dream went on. He heard whispers and saw the two pale points of light approaching slowly. He woke and found that the others were speaking softly near him and that a dim light was falling on his face. High up above the eastern archway, through a shaft near the roof, came a long pale gleam, and across the hall through the northern arch light also glimmered faint and distantly. Frodo sat up, sorry. "Good morning," said Gandalf. "For morning it is again at last. I was right, you see. We are high up on the east side of Moria. Before today is over, we ought to find the great gates and see the waters of Mirrormere lying in the dim-rilled dale before us." "I shall be glad," said Gimli. "I have looked on Moria, and it is very great, but it has become dark and dreadful, and we have found no sign of my kindred. I doubt now that Balin ever came here." After they had breakfasted, Gandalf decided to go on again at once. "We are tired, but we shall rest better when we are outside," he said. "I think that none of us will wish to spend another night in Moria." "No, indeed," said Boromir. "Which way shall we take? Yonder eastward arch?" "Maybe," said Gandalf, "but I do not know yet exactly where we are. Unless I am quite astray, I guess that we are above and to the north of the great gates, and it may not be easy to find the right road down to them. The eastern arch will probably prove to be the way that we must take, but before we make up our minds, we ought to look about us. Let us go towards that light in the north door. If we could find a window, it would help, but I fear that the light comes only down deep shafts." Following his lead, the company passed under the northern arch. They found themselves in a wide corridor. As they went along it, the glimmer grew stronger, and they saw that it came through a doorway on their right. It was high and flat-topped, and the stone door was still upon its hinges, standing half open. Beyond it was a large square chamber. It was dimly lit, but to their eyes, after so... You guys, be good. Here, hold on. I see what the problem is. There we go. There you go. Cats. They found themselves in a wide corridor. As they went along it, the glimmer grew stronger, and they saw that it came through a doorway on their right. It was high and flat-topped, and the stone door was still upon its hinges, standing half open. Beyond it was a large square chamber. It was dimly lit, but to their eyes, after so long a time in the dark, it seemed dazzlingly bright, and they blinked as they entered. Their feet disturbed a deep dust upon the floor, and stumbled among things lying in the doorway whose shapes they could not at first make out. The chamber was lit by a wide shaft high in the further eastern wall. It slanted upwards, and far above, a small square patch of blue sky could be seen. The light of the shaft fell directly on a table in the middle of the room, a single oblong block about 2 feet high, upon which was laid a great slab of white stone. "It looks like a tomb," muttered Frodo, and bent forwards with a curious sense of foreboding to look more closely at it. Gandalf came quickly to his side. On the slab, runes were deeply graven. There's the runes. If you guys don't know, Tolkien was a linguist by trade. He was a language professor, and he invented several synthetic languages and alphabets for his Lord of the Rings books. He took way too much trouble and care with that, actually. But it's cool. The runes are cool. "These are Daeron's runes, such as were used of old in Moria," said Gandalf. "Here is written in the tongues of men and dwarves, Balin, son of Fundin, Lord of Moria." "He is dead then," said Frodo. "I feared it was so." Gimli cast his hood over his face. Chapter 5, The Bridge of Khazad-dûm. The Company of the Ring stood silent beside the tomb of Balin. Frodo thought of Bilbo and his long friendship with the dwarf, and of Balin's visit to the Shire long ago. In that dusty chamber in the mountains, it seemed 1,000 years ago and on the other side of the world. At length they stirred and looked up, and began to search for anything that would give them tidings of Balin's fate, or show what had become of his folk. There was another smaller door on the other side of the chamber, under the shaft. By both the doors they could now see that many bones were lying, and among them were broken swords and axe heads, and cloven shields and helms. Some of the swords were crooked, orc scimitars with blackened blades. There were many recesses cut in the rock of the walls, and in them were large iron-browned chests of wood. All had been broken and plundered, but beside the shattered lid of one there lay the remains of a book. It had been slashed and stabbed and partly burned, and it was so stained with black and other dark marks like old blood that little of it could be read. Gandalf lifted it carefully, but the leaves cracked and broke as he laid it on the slab. He pored over it for some time without speaking. Frodo and Gimli, standing at his side, could see, as he gingerly turned the leaves, that they were written by many different hands, in runes, both of Moria and of Dale, and here and there in Elvish script. At last Gandalf looked up. "It seems to be a record of the fortunes of Balin's folk," he said. "I guess that it began with their coming to Dimril Dale nigh on 30 years ago. The pages seem to have numbers referring to the years after their arrival. The top page is marked 1, 3, so at least 2 are missing from the beginning. Listen to this. We drove out orcs from the Great Gate and Guard, I think. The next word is blurred and burned, probably room. We slew many in the bright, I think, sun in the dale. Floy was killed by an arrow. He slew the great. Then there's a blur followed by Floy under grass near Mirror. The next line or two I cannot read. Then comes, we have taken the 21st hall of North End to dwell in. There is, I cannot read what. A shaft is mentioned. Then Balin has set up his seat in the chamber of Mazar Bol." "The Chamber of Records," said Gimli. "I guess that is where we now stand." "Well, I can read no more for a long way," said Gandalf, "except the word gold, and Durin's axe, and something helm. Then, Balin is now Lord of Moria. That seems to end a chapter. After some stars, another hand begins, and I can see we found true silver, and later the word well forged, and then something, I have it, Mithril. And the last 2 lines, Owen to seek for the upper armories of Third Deep, something go westwards, a blur, to Holland Gate." Gandalf paused and set a few leaves aside. There are several pages of the same sort, rather hastily written and much damaged, he said, but I can make little of them in this light. Now there must be a number of leaves missing, because they begin to be numbered 5, the 5th year of the colony, I suppose. Let me see. No, they are too cut and stained. I cannot read them. We might do better in the sunlight. Wait, here is something. A large, bold hand using an elvish script. That would be Ori's hand, said Gimli, looking over the wizard's arm. He could write well and speedily, and often used the elvish characters. I fear he had ill tidings to record in a fair hand, said Gandalf. The first clear word is sorrow, but the rest of the line is lost, unless it ends in Esther. Yes, it must be yester, followed by day, being the 10th of November, Balin, Lord of Moria, fell in Dimrill Dale. He went alone to look in Mirror, and orc shot him from behind a stone. We slew the orc, but many more up from east up the silver load. The remainder of the page is so blurred that I can hardly make anything out, but I think I can read, we have barred the gates, and then can hold them long if, and then perhaps horrible, and suffer. Poor Balin. He seems to have kept the title that he took for less than 5 years. I wonder what happened afterwards, but there is no time to puzzle out the last few pages. Here is the last page of all. He paused and sighed. It is grim reading, he said. I fear their end was cruel. Listen. We cannot get out. We cannot get out. They have taken the bridge and second hall. Frár and Loni and Nali fell there. Then there are 4 lines smeared so that I can only read went 5 days ago. The last lines run, the pool is up to the wall at Westgate. The watcher in the water took Owen. We cannot get out. The end comes, and then drums, drums in the deep. I wonder what that means. The last thing written is in a trailing scrawl of elf letters. They are coming. There is nothing more. Gandalf paused and stood in silent thought. My nose really is itching like it's going to kill me. I wonder what it is about these readings that makes this happen with my nose itching like this, because it doesn't happen other times. Dust from where I put the book, maybe? A sudden dread and a horror of the chamber fell on the company. We cannot get out, muttered Gimli. It was well for us that the pool had sunk a little and that the watcher was sleeping down at the southern end. Gandalf raised his head and looked around. They seem to have made a last stand by both doors, he said, but there were not many left by that time. So ended the attempt to retake Moria. It was valiant but foolish. The time has not come yet. Now, I fear, we must say farewell to Balin, son of Fundin. Here he must lie in the halls of his fathers. We will take this book, the Book of Mazarbul, and look at it more closely later. You had better keep it, Gimli, and take it back to Dain if you get a chance. It will interest him, though it will grieve him deeply. Come, let us go. The morning is passing. Oh my God, I'm just going to take my nose off. Which way shall we go? Asked Boromir. Back to the hall, answered Gandalf, but our visit to this room has not been in vain. I now know where we are. This must be, as Gimli says, the chamber of Mazarbul, and the hall must be the 21st of the north end. Therefore, we should leave by the eastern arch of the hall and bear right and south and go downwards. The 21st hall should be on the 7th level, that is 6 above the level of the gates. Come now, back to the hall. Gandalf had hardly spoken these words when there came a great noise, a rolling boom that seemed to come from depths far below and to tremble in the stone at their feet. They sprang towards the door in alarm. Doom, doom, it rolled again, as if huge hands were turning the very caverns of Moria into a vast drum. Then there came an echoing blast. A great horn was blown in the hall, and answering horns and harsh cries were heard further off. There was a hurrying sound of many feet. They are coming, cried Legolas. We cannot get out, said Gimli. Trapped, said Gandalf. Why did I delay? Here we are caught, just as they were before. But I was not here then. We will see what... Doom, doom, came the drumbeat, and the walls shook. Slam the doors and wedge them, shouted Aragorn, and keep your packs on as long as you can. We may get a chance to cut our way out yet. No, said Gandalf. We must not get shut in. Keep the east door ajar. We will go that way if we get a chance. Another harsh horn call and shrill cries rang out. Feet were coming down the corridor. There was a ring and clatter as the company drew their swords. Glamdring shone with a pale light, and Sting glinted at the edges. Boromir set his shoulder against the western door. "Wait a moment. Do not close it yet," said Gandalf. He sprang forward to Boromir's side and drew himself up to his full height. "Who comes hither to disturb the rest of Balin, Lord of Moria?" he cried in a loud voice. There was a rush of hoarse laughter, like the fall of sliding stones into a pit. Amid the clamor, a deep voice was raised in command. Doom, boom, doom went the drums in the deep. With a quick movement, Gandalf stepped before the narrow opening of the door and thrust forward his staff. There was a dazzling flash that lit the chamber and the passage outside. For an instant, the wizard looked out. Arrows whined and whistled down the corridor as he sprang back. "There are orcs, very many of them," he said, "and some are large and evil, black uruks of Mordor. For the moment they are hanging back, but there is something else there. A great cave troll, I think, or more than one. There is no hope of escape that way." "And no hope at all if they come at the other door as well," said Boromir. "There's no sound outside here yet," said Aragorn, who was standing by the eastern door listening. "The passage on this side plunges straight down a stair. It plainly does not lead back towards the hall. But it is no good flying blindly this way with the pursuit just behind. We cannot block the door. Its key is gone and the lock is broken and it opens inwards. We must do something to delay the enemy first. We will make them fear the chamber of Mazarbul," he said grimly, feeling the edge of his sword Anduril. That could be book dust, Gandalf. Heavy feet were heard in the corridor. Boromir flung himself against the door and heaved it to. Then he wedged it with broken sword blades and splinters of wood. The company retreated to the other side of the chamber, but they had no chance to fly yet. There was a blow on the door that made it quiver, and then it began to grind slowly open, driving back the wedges. A huge arm and shoulder with a dark skin of greenish scales was thrust through the widening gap. Then a great flat toeless foot was forced through below. There was a dead silence outside. Boromir leaped forward and hewed at the arm with all his might, but his sword rang, glanced aside, and fell from his shaken hand. The blade was notched. Suddenly, and to his own surprise, Frodo felt a hot wrath blaze up in his heart. "The Shire!" he cried, and springing beside Boromir, he stooped and stabbed with Sting at the hideous foot. There was a bellow, and the foot jerked back, nearly wrenching Sting from Frodo's arm. Black drops dripped from the blade and smoked on the floor. Boromir hurled himself against the door and slammed it again. "One for the Shire," cried Aragorn. "The hobbit's bite is deep. You have a good blade, Frodo, son of Drogo." There was a crash on the door, followed by crash after crash. Rams and hammers were beating against it. It cracked and staggered back, and the opening grew suddenly wide. Arrows came whistling in, but struck the northern wall and fell harmlessly to the floor. There was a horn blast, and a rush of feet, and orcs one after another leaped into the chamber. How many there were the company could not count. The affray was sharp, but the orcs were dismayed by the fierceness of the defense. Legolas shot two through the throat. Gimli hewed the legs from under another that had sprung up on Balin's tomb. Boromir and Aragorn slew many. When 13 had fallen, the rest fled shrieking, leaving the defenders unharmed, except for Sam, who had a scratch along the scalp. A quick duck had saved him, and he had felled his orc, a sturdy thrust with his barrow blade. A fire was smoldering in his brown eyes that would have made Ted Sandyman step backwards if he had seen it. "Now is the time," cried Gandalf. "Let us go before the troll returns." But even as they retreated, and before Pippin and Merry had reached the stair outside, a huge orc chieftain, almost man-high, clad in black mail from head to foot, leaped into the chamber. Behind him his followers clustered in the doorway. His broad, flat face was swart, his eyes were like coals, and his tongue was red. He wielded a great spear. With a thrust of his huge hide shield, he turned Boromir's sword and bore him backwards, throwing him to the ground. Diving under Aragorn's blow with the speed of a striking snake, he charged into the company and thrust with his spear straight at Frodo. The blow caught him on the right side, and Frodo was hurled against the wall and pinned. Sam, with a cry, hacked at the spear shaft, and it broke. But even as the orc flung down the truncheon and swept out his scimitar... Yes, yes, Zoe. But even as the orc flung down the truncheon and swept out his scimitar, Anduril came down upon his helm. There was a flash like flame, and the helm burst asunder. "No, Zoe, no." Here, I'll put you over there. There you go. The orc fell with cloven head. His followers fled howling as Boromir and Aragorn sprang at them. Why are you coming back now? What is it, Zoe? We're very busy here. It's very intense. You always pick the intense parts. You know, don't you, from my voice? It's the intensity that's attracting you, isn't it? Are you worried? It's okay, Zoe. The orcs can't get us, buddy. We're safe. For now. Yeah, it's all right, buddy. But you can't linger here. This is bad country. You can't lay down right there. No, that's lying on the keyboard. You can't do that. We've been through this many times. There you go. That's much better. That's a good kitty. There was a flash like flame, and the helm burst asunder. The orc fell with cloven head. His followers fled howling as Boromir and Aragorn sprang at them. Doom, doom went the drums in the deep. The great voice rolled out again. That's very Silent Hill. I've never noticed that before. Zoe, you can't get in my lap right now. We do this every night. Come on, you can't do that. Now, shouted Gandalf, now is the last chance. Run for it. Aragorn picked up Frodo where he lay by the wall and made for the stair, pushing Merry and Pippin in front of him. The others followed, but Gimli had to be dragged away by Legolas. In spite of the peril, he lingered by Balin's tomb with his head bowed. Boromir hauled the eastern door to, grinding upon its hinges. It had great iron rings on either side, but could not be fastened. Hey, I am not a cat. I am all right, gasped Frodo. I can walk. Put me down. Aragorn nearly dropped him in amazement. I thought you were dead, he cried. Not yet, said Gandalf, but there is no time for wonder. Off you go, all of you, down the stairs. Wait a few minutes for me at the bottom, but if I do not come soon, go on. Go quickly and choose paths leading right and downwards. We cannot leave you to hold the door alone, said Aragorn. Do as I say, said Gandalf fiercely. Swords are no more use here. Go. I also had never noticed how much the sequence in Star Wars Episode 4, where they escape from the Death Star, how much that resembles this. Like, down to Obi-Wan staying behind to fight Darth. Like, and they're on the wrong level. Like, at one point, some of the characters are on the wrong level to go directly to the Millennium Falcon. And that's the first time it echoed, like, to the right and downwards. Like, that's the... I mean, George Lucas and his writers, they probably were big fans of Lord of the Rings because everybody with taste is. So, little wonder there. Oh, also Gandalf falling and then coming back also is like Obi-Wan. I must have noticed all that before, right? Those movies came out when I was a kid. I've just forgotten. I'm not a big Star Wars nerd, believe it or not. We cannot leave you to hold the door alone, said Aragorn. Do as I say, said Gandalf fiercely. Swords are no more use here. Go. The passage was lit by no shaft and was utterly dark. They groped their way down a long flight of steps and then looked back, but they could see nothing, except high above them the faint glimmer of the wizard's staff. He seemed to be still standing on guard by the closed door. Frodo breathed heavily and leaned against Sam, who put his arms about him. They stood peering up the stairs into the darkness. Frodo thought he could hear the voice of Gandalf above, muttering words that ran down the sloping roof with a sighing echo. He could not catch what was said. The walls seemed to be trembling. Every now and again the drum beats throbbed and rolled, doom, doom. Suddenly at the top of the stair there was a stab of white light. Then there was a dull rumble and a heavy thud. The drum beats broke out wildly, doom, boom, and then stopped. Gandalf came flying down the steps and fell to the ground in the midst of the company. Well, that's over, said the wizard, struggling to his feet. I have done all that I could, but I have met my match and have nearly been destroyed. But don't stand here, go on. You will have to do without light for a while. I am rather shaken. Go on. Where are you, Gimli? Come ahead with me. Keep close behind, all of you. They stumbled after him, wondering what had happened. Doom, doom went the drum beats again. They now sounded muffled and far away, but they were following. There was no other sound of pursuit, neither tramp of feet nor any voice. Gandalf took no turns, right or left, for the passage seemed to be going in the direction that he desired. Every now and again it descended a flight of steps, 50 or more, to a lower level. At the moment that was their chief danger, for in the dark they could not see a descent until they came on it and put their feet out into emptiness. Gandalf felt the ground with his staff like a blind man. At the end of an hour they had gone a mile, or maybe a little more, and had descended many flights of stairs. There was still no sound of pursuit. Almost they began to hope that they would escape. At the bottom of the seventh flight, Gandalf halted. "It is getting hot," he gasped. "We ought to be down at least to the level of the gates now. Soon I think we should look for a left-hand turn to take us east. I hope it is not far. I am very weary. I must rest here a moment, even if all the orcs ever spawned are after us. Even if all the orcs ever spawned are after us." I just need to sandpaper my face. I really do. Gimli took his arm and helped him down to a seat on the step. "What happened away up there at the door?" he asked. "Did you meet the beater of the drums?" "I do not know," answered Gandalf, "but I found myself suddenly faced by something that I have not met before. I could think of nothing to do but to try and put a shutting spell on the door. I know many, but to do things of that kind rightly requires time, and even then the door can be broken by strength. As I stood there, I could hear orc voices on the other side. At any moment, I thought they would burst it open. I could not hear what was said. They seemed to be talking in their own hideous language. All I caught was gash, that is fire. Then something came into the chamber. I felt it through the door, and the orcs themselves were afraid and fell silent. It laid hold of the iron ring, and then it perceived me and my spell. What it was, I cannot guess, but I have never felt such a challenge. The counterspell was terrible. It nearly broke me. For an instant, the door left my control and began to open. I had to speak a word of command. That proved too great a strain. The door burst in pieces. Something dark as a cloud was blocking out all the light inside, and I was thrown backwards down the stairs. All the wall gave way, and the roof of the chamber as well, I think. I am afraid Balin is buried deep, and maybe something else is buried there too. I cannot say. But at least the passage behind us was completely blocked. Ah, I have never felt so spent, but it is passing. And now what about you, Frodo? There was not time to say so, but I have never been more delighted in my life than when you spoke. I feared that it was a brave but dead hobbit that Aragorn was carrying. What about me? Said Frodo. I am alive and whole, I think. I am bruised and in pain, but it is not too bad. Well, said Aragorn, I can only say that hobbits are made of a stuff so tough I have never met the like of it. Had I known, I would have spoken softer in the inn at Bree. That spear thrust would have skewered a wild boar. Well, it did not skewer me, I am glad to say, said Frodo. Though I feel as if I had been caught between a hammer and an anvil. He said no more. He found breathing painful. You take after Bilbo, said Gandalf. There's more about you than meets the eye, as I said of him long ago. Frodo wondered if the remark meant more than it said. They now went on again. Oh my God. My whole face is itching now. I don't have any Benadryl. So I just have to scratch it until it stops itching. Until it's just, I'm all bloody faced. Turn into an analog horror entity. Welcome back, guys. This is my favorite part of this book. I love this part. I don't know all the details of the ways in which this particular part of this book seem very Lovecraftian are sort of coincidental, but sort of not. Lovecraft and his circle of weird tales writers, including Robert Howard and Clark Ashton Smith, have an exactly parallel literary position in American pulp literature as Tolkien and the Inklings do in high literature, mainstream fantasy literature in England. That is C.S. Lewis, Charles Williams, and that crowd. The Moria sequence seems very Lovecraftian in every way. It's because the shelf of fantasy and horror for adults to read at that time was so shallow. The Lovecraft and Howard in that crowd, and Tolkien and Lewis in that crowd, they read the same 100 books. That's all there is to that. They were all fans of Algernon Blackwood and Arthur Machen and M.R. James and George MacDonald, um, and maybe one or two other influences that are escaping me at the moment. William Morris for sure. Um, I assume they already are Edison, but that's more recent. Um, why Moria is particularly super Lovecraftian, I'm not sure. Um, that is to say, I feel like there must be some original underground horror adjacent dark fantasy epic. Um, there is an influence on all of these. I don't know what it is, but there also is an enduring fascination with underground landscapes and civilizations and societies going in the fantasy literature all the way back, of course. I mean, I can think of other examples of just obscure books that I like that are in that vein. I feel like my face is covered with dangling cat hairs tickling each other and me. They now went on again. Before long, Gimli spoke. He had keen eyes in the dark. I think, he said, that there is a light ahead, but it is not daylight. It is red. What can it be? Gosh, muttered Gandalf. I wonder if that is what they meant, that the lower levels are on fire. Still, we can only go on. It's so Silent Hill. Soon the light became unmistakable and could be seen by all. It was flickering and glowing on the walls away down the passage before them. They could now see their way. In front, the road sloped down swiftly, and some way ahead there stood a low archway. Through it the growing light came. The air became very hot. When they came to the arch, Gandalf went through, signing to them to wait. As he stood just beyond the opening, they saw his face lit by a red glow. Quickly he stepped back. There is some new devilry here, he said, devised for our welcome, no doubt. But I know now where we are. We have reached the first deep, the level immediately below the gates. This is the second hall of Old Moria, and the gates are near, away beyond the eastern end, on the left, not more than a quarter of a mile. Across the bridge, up a broad stair, along a wide road, through the first hall, and out. But come and look. They peered out. Before them was another cavernous hall. It was loftier and far longer than the one in which they had slept. They were near its eastern end. Westward it ran away into darkness. Down the center stalked a double line of towering pillars. They were carved like boles of mighty trees whose boughs upheld the roof with a branching tracery of stone. Their stems were smooth and black, but a red glow was darkly mirrored in their sides. Right across the floor, close to the feet of two huge pillars, a great fissure had opened. Out of it a fierce red light came, and now and again flames licked at the brink and curled about the bases of the columns. Wisps of dark smoke wavered in the hot air. If we had come by the main road down from the upper halls, we should have been trapped here, said Gandalf. Let us hope that the fire now lies between us and pursuit. Come, there is no time to lose. Even as he spoke, they heard again the pursuing drum beat. Doom, doom, doom. Away beyond the shadows at the western end of the hall there came cries and horn calls. Doom, doom. The pillars seemed to tremble and the flames to quiver. Now for the last race, said Gandalf. If the sun is shining outside, we may still escape. After me. He turned left and sped across the smooth floor of the hall. The distance was greater than it had looked. As they ran, they heard the beat and echo of many hurrying feet behind. A shrill yell went up. They had been seen. There was a ring and clash of steel. An arrow whistled over Frodo's head. Boromir laughed. They did not expect this, he said. The fire has cut them off. We are on the wrong side. Look ahead, called Gandalf. The bridge is near. It is dangerous and narrow. Suddenly Frodo saw before him a black chasm. At the end of the hall, the floor vanished and fell to an unknown depth. The outer door could only be reached by a slender bridge of stone without curb or rail that spanned the chasm with one curving spring of 50 feet. It was an ancient defense of the dwarves against any enemy that might capture the first hall and the outer passages. They could only pass across it in single file. At the brink, Gandalf halted, and the others came up in a pack behind. "Lead the way, Gimli," he said. "Pippin and Merry next. Straight on and up the stair beyond the door." Arrows fell among them. One struck Frodo and sprang back. Another pierced Gandalf's hat and stuck there like a black feather. Frodo looked behind. Beyond the fire he saw swarming black figures. There seemed to be hundreds of orcs. They brandished spears and scimitars which shone red as blood in the firelight. Doom, doom rolled the drum beats, growing louder and louder. Doom, doom. Legolas turned and set an arrow to the string, though it was a long shot for his small bow. He drew, but his hand fell, and the arrow slipped to the ground. He gave a cry of dismay and fear. Two great trolls appeared. They bore great slabs of stone and flung them down to serve as gangways over the fire. But it was not the trolls that had filled the elf with terror. The ranks of the orcs had opened, and they crowded away, as if they themselves were afraid. Something was coming up behind them. What it was could not be seen. It was like a great shadow, in the middle of which was a dark form, of man shape maybe, yet greater, and a power and terror seemed to be in it and to go before it. It came to the edge of the fire, and the light faded as if a cloud had bent over it. Then with a rush it leaped across the fissure. The flames roared up to greet it and wreathed about it, and a black smoke swirled in the air. Its streaming mane kindled and blazed behind it. In its right hand was a blade like a stabbing tongue of fire. In its left it held a whip of many thongs. I, wailed Legolas, a Balrog is come. Gimli stared with wide eyes. Durin's bane, he cried, and letting his axe fall, he covered his face. A Balrog, muttered Gandalf, now I understand. He faltered and leaned heavily on his staff. What an evil fortune, and I am already weary. The dark figure streaming with fire raced towards them. The orcs yelled and poured over the stone gangways. Then Boromir raised his horn and blew. Loud the challenge rang and bellowed, like the shout of many throats under the cavernous roof. For a moment the orcs quailed, and the fiery shadow halted. Then the echoes died as suddenly as a flame blown out by a dark wind, and the enemy advanced again. Over the bridge, cried Gandalf, recalling his strength. Fly! This is a foe beyond any of you. I must hold the narrow way. Fly! Aragorn and Boromir did not heed the command, but still held their ground side by side behind Gandalf at the far end of the bridge. The others halted just within the doorway at the hall's end and turned, unable to leave their leader to face the enemy alone. The Balrog reached the bridge. Gandalf stood in the middle of the span, leaning on the staff in his left hand, but in his other hand Glamdring gleamed, cold and white. His enemy halted again, facing him, and the shadow about it reached out like two vast wings. It raised the whip, and the thongs whined and cracked. Fire came from its nostrils, but Gandalf stood firm. You cannot pass, he said. The orcs stood still, and a dead silence fell. I am a servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of Anor. You cannot pass. The dark fire will not avail you, flame of Odun. Go back to the shadow. You cannot pass. The Balrog made no answer. The fire in it seemed to die, but the darkness grew. It stepped forward slowly onto the bridge, and suddenly it drew itself up to a great height, and its wings were spread from wall to wall, but still Gandalf could be seen, glimmering in the gloom. He seemed small and altogether alone, gray and bent like a wizened tree before the onset of a storm. From out of the shadow a red sword leaped flaming. Glamdring glittered white in answer. There was a ringing clash and a stab of white fire. The Balrog fell back, and its sword flew up in molten fragments. The wizard swayed on the bridge, stepped back a pace, and then again stood still. You cannot pass, he said. With a bound, the Balrog leaped full upon the bridge. Its whip whirled and hissed. He cannot stand alone, cried Aragorn suddenly, and ran back along the bridge. Elendil, he shouted, I am with you, Gandalf. Gondor, cried Boromir, and leaped after him. At that moment, Gandalf lifted his staff, and crying aloud, he smote the bridge before him. The staff broke asunder and fell from his hand. A blinding sheet of white flame sprang up. The bridge cracked. Right at the Balrog's feet it broke, and the stone upon which it stood crashed into the gulf, while the rest remained, poised, quivering like a tongue of rock thrust out into emptiness. Quivering like a tongue of rock thrust out into emptiness. With a terrible cry, the Balrog fell forward, and its shadow plunged down and vanished. But even as it fell, it swung its whip, and the thongs lashed and curled about the wizard's knees, dragging him to the brink. He staggered and fell, grasped vainly at the stone, and slid into the abyss. "Fly, you fools," he cried, and was gone. The fires went out, and blank darkness fell. The company stood rooted with horror, staring into the pit. Even as Aragorn and Boromir came flying back, the rest of the bridge cracked and fell. With a cry, Aragorn roused them. "Come, I will lead you now," he called. "We must obey his last command. Follow me." They stumbled wildly up the great stairs beyond the door, Aragorn leading, Boromir at the rear. At the top was a wide, echoing passage. Along this they fled. Frodo heard Sam at his side weeping, and then he found that he himself was weeping as he ran. Doom, 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 the drum beats rolled behind, mournful now and slow. Doom. They ran on. The light grew before them. Great shafts pierced the roof. They ran swifter. They passed into a hall, bright with daylight from its high windows in the east. They fled across it. Through its huge broken doors they passed, and suddenly before them the great gates opened, an arch of blazing light. There was a guard of orcs crouching in the shadows behind the great doorposts towering on either side, but the gates were shattered and cast down. Aragorn smote to the ground the captain that stood in his path, and the rest fled in terror of his wrath. The company swept past them and took no heed of them. Out of the gates they ran and sprang down the huge and age-worn steps, the threshold of Moria. Thus, at last, they came beyond hope under the sky and felt the wind on their faces. They did not halt until they were out of bowshot from the walls. Dimrill Dale lay about them. The shadow of the misty mountains lay upon it, but eastwards there was a golden light on the land. It was but 1 hour after noon. The sun was shining. The clouds were white and high. They looked back. Dark yawned the archway of the gates under the mountain shadow. Faint and far beneath the earth rolled the slow drum beats. Doom. A thin black smoke trailed out. Nothing else was to be seen. The dale all around was empty. Doom. Grief at last wholly overcame them, and they wept long, some standing and silent, some cast upon the ground. Doom, doom. The drum beats faded. What an oddly cinematic way to close that chapter. Oh my God, I'm just going to burn my nose off with my lighter. I feel like I'm putting hair onto my face. Yeah, an hour and 42 minutes. I'm very excited. I guess I'm going to call it. Guys. Thanks, Nolan, for being here. Thanks, Kat, Gandalf. That's my favorite part of that book. It's all downhill from there. I'll see you guys in the next one. I'm not working tomorrow. Pretty sure I'm not working tomorrow. So I should be on time with you cannot pass is better than you shall not pass, Salted Slug. Like, it's an unstoppable force, immovable object moment is the idea. Like, neither of them can triumph. They're equally matched in some way. So the bridge gives way. I mean, he does it on purpose, sort of. It's like Gandalf sucker punches the Balrog by taking out the bridge, is what it reads like. He does get into explaining a little bit more what happened there later when he comes back. Yes, it's late. I should go eat something. Thanks for being here, guys. This one was fun. I'll see you in the next one. Yeah, I should be on again tonight at a basically regular time with the chat stream and this stream. 1:39. I might go back to doing a chat stream on the phone for a little while. I might, but I should be tired and I should rest, so maybe not. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next one.